One of the great things about having such great members of the press here is that you get to sometimes see kind of the issues, or it's just interesting points that often go kind of overlooked or unnoticed. So we're going to take advantage of this time we have with all of you. Can we just start with you, Glenn? We'll come down the line. Just something interesting you saw during this last election that really should be talked about.
The turnout was amazing. People were engaged. They cared. They actually felt like their vote mattered when you see how close some of these races were, not just the 4th Congressional, but a lot of these House seats that are only a couple of hundred votes. People felt like they were really making a difference. And when the LG's office is now saying that they're comparing this to other presidential elections as far as turnout, not midterms, they've gone well beyond that. It's very interesting to see. It's also interesting to see how much the impact of by-mail voting has had. And even though it does seem like a lot of people came out for Prop 2, the fact that they're registered now means they'll get a ballot in the future, and we might see higher turnout just down the road.
I think you're mentioning the straight party ticket too. I mean, the straight party voting made a huge shift in Salt Lake County. We had races that we didn't expect necessarily to be close that were pretty close. We had a couple legislative seats that flipped. Possibly the recorder race. Adam Gardner lost the Republican seat for the recorder. It had a huge impact, and all the way down the ballot. So these propositions that people turned out for filtered down.
And I think that one of the things we're seeing is that Salt Lake County kind of solidified itself as a blue stronghold. It was a lot of pockets before, Salt Lake, other areas, but now I think the county in general has just solidified itself as that's kind of a blue area.
Do you think these voters stay active?
It's hard to say, because if it has to be something pushing you. But then again, if you get that ballot in the mail, you might say, "Oh yeah, it's voting time," and you never know what's going to happen. I think it's going to be too hard to predict.
One of the things I've heard is a predictor of who's voting is who's voted before, and so once you create a habit, then
try to follow this
a lot easier.
Hopefully, we started a habit.
Yeah.
All right, that's good, Nicole.
I was interested not surprised, but looking at the reasons the non-binding opinion question about the gas tax failed. I think that the language on the ballot is what determines that. I don't think a lot of people research some of these things before going into the ballot box, and so seeing the vague language of that non-binding opinion question and wondering what it really means and what it's really going to turned a lot of people off, and I think that's a big part of why it failed.
Go ahead, Glenn.
Oh, and I was going to say, I'm from Seattle, and one of the things I noticed is that back there, a lot of questions that added any tax or anything to your expenses failed. So I think a lot of people are in a situation right now where if you are going to add anything to their food or to their gas or to their daily expenses, they're saying no. So that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, what about this great point she mentions, though? Because the words do matter on this thing. What if question number 1, the non-binding question 1, was written the same way as Proposition 3 on Medicaid expansion? Yeah. 0.15% tied to something you don't feel right away? Would it have changed it?
I don't know if it would change. It might have not failed as by that wide of a margin, but I think that people would have felt better about voting for it and known what they were voting for, at least.
I think the proponents made a mistake in overcomplicating that. They were going to go with just a straight income tax increase. They made this deal with the legislature that made it super complicated, raising gas taxes, moving taxes here, moving taxes there, and people, they didn't understand it. But also, I think Nicole's point is absolutely right. It's really hard to poll that's what not just the gas tax increase, but also Constitutional Amendment C. You ask people about should the legislature be able to call themselves into special session. That was polling with very low support. It ended up passing almost 2-1. I think because the polling questions are very simple, the language on the ballots are very complicated, and the default position is no. And so I think you ended up seeing some surprises on all of the propositions, the Constitutional Amendment C and that non-binding question. I think those are, I think it's confusing to voters, but I also think there's especially as Glenn mentioned on tax increases, no is the default option.
Yeah, certainly seems to be the case. Okay, thank you very much for your great insights. Do you have anything else, Robert?
No, I'm curious to see what happens with the propositions. I think it's going to be interesting to see the fallout, how much the legislature tinkers with them, and what their narrow margins of passage means for future propositions. A lot of money went into those, and they barely got through. And so we got to see where the dust settles on that.
Can't wait to watch.
Yeah, but when you say that, it's going to be interesting to see as well. Will the legislature now take up more issues and get them done, knowing that the voters are willing to go to the ballot?
Heat under them.
Great question. Okay, thank you for your insights.